Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome to Shunya 1, episode 5. I can't believe that we are here again, and we're already 5 episodes down. We're a month of, I think, we've just crossed a month of recording this show.
That sounds about right.
And it's been pretty interesting.
It's been fun.
I did not know, like a month ago, I didn't know I'd be hosting a talk show. And, and here I am.
Yeah.
But it's been great.
Good job.
Thanks, Amit, for getting me hooked on this. And I'm so happy to all the guests who basically decided to show up and help me through this.
No, we've had a good roster so far, and we're glad to have Shalin come in.
Yes. So let me introduce the guest for today. Right here with me is Shalin Shah, who is yet another friend and angel investor now in India. And he has an interesting background himself. He's been doing this kind of stuff for a while now, and he's moved here from the US, moved back, I would say.
No, just moved here. I've never lived here in my life.
Yeah, you've never lived here.
Okay, that's unusual.
Yeah, I moved here 4 years ago. I've been coming here every year all my life during summers, but never actually lived here.
Coming just to South Bombay.
Yeah.
Nowhere else. Not even.
Landed at the domestic airport. That's pretty good.
Yeah, but that's about it. He's just been coming for summers to South Bombay and then going back to the States.
That's understandable.
Yes, he's seen it when the ceiling came up, and he was
makes
like,
South Bombay sound like south of France. You know, land and, like have a holiday. Like, it's not like that though.
Not at all.
But, well, great to have you here. Thanks for making the trek to Bandra one more time. But saying so, I mean, since you've been here a couple of years now, and you've jumped into the, you can say, the heydays of the startup ecosystem, you've jumped right in. So it'll be interesting to talk to you about what you've seen and how you've seen this space change or where it's at, and we'll get into that. And I think we should have an interesting chat going forward.
Sure, that's good.
So just to kick it off, this week's again been a pretty interesting week in tech, I guess, and tech and biz and
everything.
Everything. We have a couple of stuff which has happened, but I think the most hyped and talked about thing which happened, which didn't really make so much of an impact, was probably the Apple event, which I know a bunch of my friends were really looking up to. I know someone who actually set up like candles and stuff to watch the.
Get out of here!
you know who it is, just to watch the show. But yeah, man, it was so not what we expected. And I think Apple's at a point in their life, probably again, when they are struggling with innovation a little bit.
That's that's something that's always going to be part of what, like innovators' dilemmas and all that kind of stuff, right? You're always going to see a certain amount of that kind of stuff. I think what's interesting with this thing was the HomePod was pretty much the only thing of any interest whatsoever.
Yeah, but it's a massive departure from their usual.
Is it really after buying Beats?
Well, yeah, I guess so now. Yeah. Now that they're in the speaker business.
I feel like, Apple over... So, I think of Apple as it's a consumer electronics company. I mean, like, that's essentially what they do, right? I mean, like, they make really, really cool consumer electronics, right? And this is a consumer electronics. So, I mean, like, I think it makes sense from what they're doing. But I don't know how good it's going to work because I don't have an iPhone, but I do have an iPad, and Siri is not that good.
No,
and this thing is.
I think it's actually a shot for them for having their homegrown AI kind of work out, right? Is they needed something to compete against Amazon, and AI has not been something that they've been great at. Although they came out with Siri, and that was one of the first kind of.
Yeah, it was actually the first assistant, but she was never really helpful.
And they took a lot out of it, right? I mean, like the original Siri that was there by the Israeli company that made it was more functional than what Apple released.
Yeah.
So I mean, like they
closed it off quite a bit.
They closed it off.
In fact, that's also one of the trends which I'm seeing Apple follow. Right, they were very developer. So this was a developer event. WWDC is always about features in the OS and so on, and iOS 11 and so on. So they're still playing the follow-on sort of language. I mean, with the OS features. I mean, they've still not, I would say, this happens every time Apple announces something. The Android guys say, hey, we had it for 2 years.
Well, that doesn't matter.
But they're still like that. So that's where the shocker is,
I don't think the sequence of these things matters so much, right? Because, I mean, like, Android might have had a fingerprint reader before Apple, but Apple implemented it well, right? Yeah. I don't see that any of these fingerprint readers on any of these Android phones work anywhere close to as well as they do on an iPhone.
Right.
So I don't think that it is necessarily just like, a kind of follow approach. Yeah, but I don't see anything wrong with that approach. More to the point, right? I think I'm a believer that execution is everything. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, like, that's kind of how.
I don't think Apple for a long time has been an innovator in a particular area, or an inventor, I should say. They've always been a revolutionizer of an existing product, whether it's an iPod, whether it's a phone, whether it's anything they do. And so I don't think. They
jump to category leader.
Absolutely.
So and charge you like triple what it should be.
Yes.
So like when the iPhone came out, right? I mean, like I was at that time kind of heavily involved in Symbian development, right? There was nothing you could do on an iPhone that you couldn't do on a Symbian phone. But let's be perfectly honest, the iPhone was so much better to use than any of these Symbian phones.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so I mean, like, the ideas were there. All the technology was there in Symbian that was there in the iPhone, right?
Right.
Whether you're talking about touch, whether you're talking about browsers, whether you're talking about programs and apps, and all that stuff was there in Symbian.
Yeah, they just took it so many notches higher.
Yeah, exactly. It just was never that great.
I think that's what they're good at, I guess. Yeah. So, well, we'll wait and see how this year plays out, and if they copy the Galaxy S8 with its all
iPhone
glass.
So, that's another thing coming out this year.
Have you heard about that? I mean,
all the leaks say it's going to be
a glass iPhone, like full glass. How is that going to look also? I mean, like, it's not like all of a sudden all the electronics are going to become transparent, right?
You never know.
What, you're going to get a transparent memory chip?
What if they have to take it up 10 notches? That's the only way to go.
But why would you do that instead of using the camera as the interface to just kind of walk behind it? I mean, like, to kind of get the back view, right? And that's transparent for all intents and purposes.
Who knows?
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean, like,
we'll see.
And any thoughts on their whole augmented reality play in this
That's
thing?
actually pretty neat, by the way.
Yeah.
That's something which I was actually impressed. So Google actually had a product out. I forget the name right now.
Google Glasses.
A couple of months ago. They actually have a design spec for a phone, which is being made right now by a few manufacturers, which has a depth sensor built in. And that lets you do the same kind of AR which is being shown now as just a software upgrade in iOS.
So what do you guys think? Is AR going to be some... do you think that Apple, Google have it right with AR with the phone, or do you think Microsoft has it right with the glasses?
I think even all the other glasses guys, right? They compete at a much more experience level than just small time AR on a phone. So I think it's both going to be there. Yeah. I think the glasses guys are like going to be there for the really specialized applications until the glasses become cheap enough, right?
And small.
Everything is now like crazy expensive. Nothing below $50,000.
The developer kit for this is like $1,500 or something, right?
Yeah. So not for either HoloLens or for any HTC Vive or even the Sony glasses.
Right.
The ones which come with a PS4 for gaming, even those are like massively expensive. So I think you'll have that specialized space for VR.
Okay.
And for AR, which is augmented reality, is essentially stuff within your normal, viewfinder, right? So I guess the phones are going to definitely have it.
I don't remember. So I mean, like, I think the glasses make more sense for AR in some ways. I've never been as blown away by a demo, or it's been a long time since I've been as blown away by a demo as I was by the HoloLens demo.
I think AR is going to be a lot more. So have you seen Snapchat's new AR stuff?
Yeah.
Like they do it pretty well. Well. So it's probably going to be used for entertainment and.
That's the first step.
Fun stuff.
But I thought with Microsoft stuff, the thing that really blew my mind was somebody teaching you how to change a pipe. By circling that pipe and saying turn this around.
No, so stuff like that
kind of stuff was
mechanic.
That's the kind of stuff that just I was like, okay, this is that was really mind-blowing.
No, stuff is going to happen.
And Minecraft.
I think.
AR Minecraft is
wow,
like...
I think you guys are missing the main category, which is porn. Like, that's where the real revolution is.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that revolution is happening.
But that's a VR
generally
revolution.
speaking,
Isn't it
porn has been kind of at the forefront of
vanguard.
innovation.
Yes.
Whether it's the
yes.
internet, pictures, media,
Cable
all that is
television,
all
video,
driven
VHS,
by porn.
yeah, all
Yeah.
of it.
I mean, I was just reading an article recently. Apparently, the amount of porn watched in India has dramatically increased because of reliance.
Because of
Oh
Geo.
yeah, I read that. I read
It's
that.
pretty crazy.
It has. I mean,
People
that's
don't
the
know.
obvious first stack which came out.
There's the bulk of your data right
Exactly.
there.
I mean, what do you think? 4 GB a day, resetting every night.
Yeah,
They knew what they were up.
Yeah,
They know what people are
they
gonna
know
be
what
up
people
to.
want over here, and our government is also very clear that porn is legal for the consumer. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I think, I mean, VR stuff is going to happen whether we like
No,
it or
but
not. I
so
think
porn
it's
feels
happening.
like a VR story rather than an AR story. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but it feels like, porn feels like something you want to be immersed in.
Probably.
Are we getting a little
Probably for a few minutes.
I mean, you could point at, your girlfriend and change her clothes, or, there's certain things that you can do.
Yeah, okay.
What kind of startup pitches have you been seeing, Shalin?
Yeah.
I think
The
you really
craziest
get the
pitch
cool
I've ever
startup
had
pitches.
was a breastfeeding cafe. That's probably the craziest pitch I've ever had.
That's a real pitch you had.
I had a real presentation. It wasn't just a pitch.
Oh, wow.
It was a breastfeeding cafe with the intent. I mean, it was a solid idea. Is that most women that just have their child, they
can't
do anywhere, so they can't get out, and so they just feel depressed oftentimes. And there's a legitimate kind of medical reason for that. And so oftentimes, they want to be able to get out and be with like-minded mothers,
Right.
or first-time mothers. And the intent is, hey, why don't we set up a breastfeeding cafe in every mall?
That's interesting.
Wow.
It's an interesting
I don't
idea.
think I'm qualified to comment on this in any which way.
I don't think any of us.
Yeah, exactly. I don't quite know what to... But okay, how about this as a point of commentary on it, right? You get a customer, and that customer is with you for the duration of breastfeeding, and then after that you lose that customer.
Exactly. That's exactly what I told her, is that I thought the idea was interesting. It was a little bit out of my area of focus for sure. But I said, what happens
When,
post
you
the
got
need?
to continuously activate
How
new
do you
customers.
keep people coming?
Yeah.
But that's true for most maternity targeting products, right? I mean, you
That's
go
a
through a
point.
churn.
Yeah,
that's
you're
fine.
right. That's a true point.
After maternity, I think the clothing oftentimes the style often changes. So a lot of and you can start selling children's clothing to those same
That's true.
mothers, children's games, stuff like that.
Did
that
they
you can
ever get
continue.
funded, do you think?
I have no idea.
No?
Did not follow up.
Wow. No, so talking about the stuff which you did end up funding, I know one topic I've been recurring on this show now is about cryptocurrency. And, I think people still want to know, at least I know a lot of audience here doesn't still know why this whole thing came about and why, it's surging so much. I think that's where we're seeing stuff, we're reading stuff about people becoming millionaires or billionaires and so on. And there's a real thesis to how it came about and how it happened. Actually, I just read about, do you know about the Byzantine general problem?
Yeah.
Which is sort of the base thesis for cryptocurrency to exist. I just read about it, in fact, from a original mail archive of Satoshi, the guy who created Bitcoin.
The Byzantine, what's it called?
The Byzantine generals problem. I think it was like a bunch of generals. Correct me if I'm wrong. A bunch of generals who were trying to plan an attack on a particular castle.
Right.
How do they coordinate? Right.
Correct.
How they all have to plan the attack together. There's a certain amount of computational time they need to plan the attack.
And so
they also have to tell each other about how they're computing. So it's about maintaining information equilibrium at the same time not losing so much time maintaining that you lose sight of the actual objective.
And the blockchain is a solution.
Yeah, and basically that's how the blockchain concept sort of came about. I think we could go into detail,
cool.
but Shalin, tell me, when you saw this very early on, you're an investor in Coinbase, which is one of the biggest exchanges out there. It's based in the US.
I think so they're about to raise a pretty large round, and they've been doing really well. Actually, this year they've been profitable every month for this year. Unlike many other startups, it's been they were started in 2012, which is when I invested. It's been a pretty short time, and they're making real money month over month. Yeah, and so the valuation that they end up getting this year, whatever they raise, is a legitimate number based on actual profit.
Revenue, yeah.
Not even revenue, profit.
Profit, okay.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I think they're doing really well. But at the time when I was kind of looking at it in 2012, I had read a lot about these white papers that you just mentioned, right. And I definitely saw there being a need for some kind of cryptocurrency in various different forms and fashions. At that time, I felt like there needed to be kind of one kind of global currency. I just felt, I was coming to India pretty often, and I was kind of dealing with these currency issues in terms of conversions and things of that nature. But more than that, I just felt like an anonymous or relatively anonymous way to do things. And having some method where it's not centralized, especially that piece where it's not centralized, was something that was really interesting to me. And I thought that could do a lot for the future of how finance works.
Right.
So at that time, a lot of the hot topics in the US were also crowdfunding,
right.
And things of that nature. And that's, again, kind of decentralizing how finance works.
Right.
And so this was one other method to do so.
Right.
So I, frankly, didn't know that much about Bitcoin. I probably had started reading about Bitcoin in 2011 or so. And I really wanted to buy one, but I didn't know how or what.
Well, do you think, just as a quick crow, I mean, do you think you would have made more money if you put that much money in buying Bitcoin then, or in Coinbase?
Yeah, so I tracked this. I mean, at that time, that was the same question I asked myself: is that should I just buy Bitcoin or should I buy, invest into Coinbase at that time?
Right. Without disclosing which is going to make you more money.
There's no doubt that I would have made far more money in Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
By a significant amount. And, Coinbase will make a massive multiple on my money, but Bitcoin has surged dramatically. I mean, so when I was looking at Coinbase, Bitcoin was probably in the teens.
Oh, man.
So since then, it's gone up pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
200 times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still in the 2,000 plus range right now.
Wow.
But yeah, so now, I mean, there's a bunch of other cryptocurrencies out there. Coinbase is actually tracking pretty much the exchange for a bunch of stuff.
So I guess going back to why I invest in Coinbase, and the decision to have not invested in the money into Bitcoin as opposed to Coinbase was actually pretty simple. I felt, and my gut feel was that Bitcoin would be version 1 of virtual currency.
Right.
We went through version 1 all through the web era in general, whether it's an Amazon.com or every other kind of version 1 of all the e-commerce or other types of businesses online.
Right.
And I felt like Bitcoin would be V1. And so I thought that there's potential money to be made on there because, there's a run-up in these things anyway.
Absolutely.
But that would come crashing down eventually and something else would replace it.
Right.
And I felt, and the big question for me is, can Coinbase kind of manage any type of digital currency or asset for that matter, not just currency?
Exactly, yeah.
And they could. They were made exactly for that. Right. And so from that perspective, I thought that Coinbase made more sense to me because if Bitcoin kind of just evaporated, then these guys can take on the next kind of wave of digital assets. And they have been able to. So they now are not just Bitcoin.
They're doing Ethereum.
Exchange, they do Ethereum, they do various other kind of assets, and they continue doing so. And so, what's actually very interesting also is that these guys, today have, it's not public, but they have most of the money that they have raised still in the bank.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, they don't really need to
invest
use
too
it.
much, yeah.
Right.
But the reason they're building that up is because they themselves see a lot of different opportunities. And so they'll be investing in many of these different things that come out.
Right.
And so you see a lot of news today about these essentially the IPOs for digital currencies.
Right. Yeah,
and
ICOs, yeah.
And those things are doing incredibly well. And just like crowdfunding has done these things are essentially allowing for things like, so Linux is an example of open source, where the foundation really didn't make any money,
Right.
but Linux is used pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Correct.
These ICOs allow for these essentially foundations to have a business in some sense. So somebody that is doing essentially open software is able to make money out of it as well, or there is some capitalist sense in it.
Right.
And so
They're changing the way these open source projects are starting out.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And so this method has changed, I think will change how open networks of any sort are going to be built, right?
Monetized. In fact, so instead of the traditional model of the big Googles of the world or Facebooks of the world, which is keep everything free and ads will pay for it. This is, in a somewhat alternate future where it need not just be ad paid. It could be that the community itself pays for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Is that decentralizing?
Decentralization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's.
So one of the questions, since you know this stuff so well, right? When we had Raj on, we asked him this question. I'd like to get your view on this as well. A question that keeps coming up for me is something like Bitcoin and its other various cryptocurrencies. Is that a currency or is that a commodity, like a wallet kind of situation?
Yes. Is it is it money or is it gold?
Yeah, that's my.
As defined by the tax man, it's an asset, so it's more like gold in that sense. But I think that I don't really have an answer for that. I think it can be used in both methods.
Where do you see the long-term future of this kind of stuff? Do you see it as like something that will be used as a way to conduct international finance seamlessly, but at the end of the day, everybody's still going to come back to their base currencies?
Yeah, so I think today the visibility of these things is more towards currency because that's what we can see and can understand.
Right.
But let me give you an example where it could become more on the asset side or wallet side. Today, there's a lot of issues around copyright. So, for example, pictures, photographs that well-known photographers are taking, whether it's news agencies or other folks that are buying them off of Getty Images or something of that nature. Oftentimes, there's a lot of people that are just using them without any copyright.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
If you can tag, if the camera manufacturer suddenly tags every picture, using some token that they've come up with, now you can kind of see, no matter how much you've touched it up, how much Photoshop you've used, the base of the picture is tagged. Right. And so you don't need to have some imaging software or some kind of image recognition. It's just that file has been tagged. So no matter where it's being used, you know where it's going.
Right.
And suddenly, kind of for photos, you now have a ability through these tokens. You can call them coins, tokens, whatever you want. Now you are able to tag them, and so they have value. So now to sell this photo, you need to kind of allow for that token to go through. And so suddenly it's got value from that perspective. So there I see it more as an asset. But now what that token is backed by, is it backed by a Bitcoin? Is it backed by Ethereum? Or is it backed by a completely new token that digital manufacturing?
In fact, that was one of the things which came out this week was actually Naval's article about tokens. I think that's the underlying science which is now coming to the forefront with the hype around Bitcoin, is the fact that all of this stuff which we spread around, use on the internet and so on, can be legitimized yet be decentralized, right? By using a token is essentially a snippet of identity which is self-contained. Without being owned by another agency, without being owned by it's not a Google password. So it's not a Facebook password that runs on Facebook.
So I might be getting too specific. I get that you're talking on a more general idea, right? But one of the issues I see with what you're talking about, and again, I could be wrong because I don't have great grounding in this stuff. Aren't we talking about DRM 2.0 with this?
Are you saying specifically for photos?
For photos, and I know that's specific to that, but I'm thinking just media generally, right? That creating assets with tokens attached to them would be kind of the way to look at that asset value. I mean, again, I know that I'm kind of picking on one
no,
point.
But it is a point, right?
So, I mean, if you take DRM, it's a little bit more constrictive. Now, if you're the owner of the photograph, for example, right, and you know a non-profit wants to use it, and they are using it, and they didn't tell you,
right,
you're not going to bother. Is that you want the non-profit to use it? But now, if Fox News came and your political views are kind of against it, or NDTV showed up and said, "Hey, look, I'm using this picture," and didn't give you any money for it,
right,
you're going to go after them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it just decentralizes it even from a DRM perspective. It's not like Sony's going to come after you, or, Getty Images is going to come after you, or whoever the producer is, or the kind of the house that you're housed in. You can be the photographer.
It gives the individual power, right? That's also what Bitcoin is about. Having individuals be able to have ownership.
No, fair enough.
Without having to rely on a larger.
I understand that.
But a DRM, I think that is true. That it could be version 2.0 for that. But I don't think that's a negative thing. I mean, these people are doing work, and you should be paying for some services.
So the concern with DRM for me was never about the protection of the data. It's always about the fact that you have to call home, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, you might not be calling home, but you got to call somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's always that step's always been my problem with DRM.
But that's what you can do as the owner of the copyright is that you can kind of tell the token that in these certain use cases, like whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on Instagram, that's acceptable.
Right.
But if it's in this situation, not acceptable.
Nice. All right. So on that, I think we'll take a quick break and we'll come back to some more stories this week and keep talking to Shalin.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says. A show that encapsulates everything in human history, from the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien, who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday on the IVM podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts on. You get one banana water free with every podcast. Right. I'll just check that.
Hey, welcome back, guys. And since we were talking about, how tokens and bitcoins are helping decentralize everything, don't you think it's all the more necessary in sort of this world where we are only being tracked more and more every single day? I mean, again, one more thing which came out this week was about how Google is now able to approximate and track you even in the offline world. Especially stuff like if you've seen an ad on Google online and if you ultimately go and buy something offline, they are with almost 70% or more accuracy, able to track exactly. They'll tie you to a purchase. The creepy part of the story actually was that they can actually tell a store owner that this guy is walking to you right now, and he last looked at this ad.
That's ridiculous.
But you're right. Scary. But I mean, you make a great point, right? I mean, the fact that why is decentralization necessary? Because we have these two massive information silos in Facebook and Google.
Yeah.
And the amount of data that they have about us is so ridiculously high that decentralization has to be on the cards.
And they have so many input devices now. So I know, Shalin, you have an interest in IoT stuff as well, and I would want to talk to you about how the kind of investments you've seen in that space. But even with that, right, all of these sensors around us, beyond just the one which we carry with us, which is our phone, and the one which we voluntarily give information to, there's still so much all over the place which is tapping into the internet now and tracking you in some way. So what do you think about that? What do you think about how crazy is that space for you?
I mean, I think that's scary for starters. I mean, more and more I'm less keen on logging in through anything via Facebook, Google, or Twitter, which is generally much easier to do. I just want to create a fake email and then just log in that way. And I will delete all my cache on a regular basis. I will do everything possible because these are the stories that I don't want to deal with.
Right.
That and the things like you hear about where some guy posted on Facebook and suddenly Shiv Sena mob came and destroyed his or her store. And so it doesn't even have to be, the all-knowing Google or Facebook.
Right.
It could be just the simple kind of folks other than that just have
who
access.
just want to get you.
Yeah,
Who are out to get you. This was the topic of the first of our first show.
Right.
Was actually about how privacy breaches, if a hacker was out to get you, they can get you.
Yeah,
they can dig up whatever shit.
This is
you've
one of
been
my
trying to
favorite
cover
little
up.
kind of parables, right? Or kind of ways to kind of describe. Sorry, I told you this 4 times
Right.
now, but I got to say it again.
Yeah.
If you and I are walking down the street, we're generally safe. But if a ninja wants to kill us, we're dead.
Yeah.
So similarly, on the internet, you're generally safe. But if a hacker wants to get you, you're done.
Yeah.
For sure.
But coming back to the machines, I mean, machines have been something which have been a interesting topic for me personally. I mean, I for one actually I love AI. I love the fact that I know the machines are going to take over one day. So I'm I'm setting the ground for like, hey, when they do. Listen, I've been good to you guys. So
we welcome our new machine overlords.
Yeah, so that's the storyline I'm gonna be taking for the rest of my life. But in more news this week, do you know that AlphaGo is retiring?
No.
Yeah. So
is it that good?
Yeah, it is.
Google's AlphaGo.
Nobody wants to play with him.
No one, because he's beating
his ball and going
everyone. AlphaGo, our famous AI Go champion, has beat everybody in the world, and it's pretty much retiring because now, so literally speaking, the guys who have played with him or whatever, played with it, are like the machine. It used to do human-like moves.
Right.
Now they have actually used the word godlike, and I read this in a few articles. But yeah, again, those guys are all Chinese or Japanese, so anyway, they're God-fearing, I'm guessing. But yeah, they have actually said that now this is beyond comprehension. I mean, they just want to learn from it now. Yeah. They don't want to play it because they know it's impossible.
Chess is the same way, isn't it?
Chess, and this was exactly 10 years ago or so when Garry Kasparov was beat by Deep Blue.
Yeah, so chess, you play against AI for practice now. You don't try and compete.
Exactly. So that's where it's at. So that's somewhat crazy. And when Deep Blue happened, they had predicted, okay, fine. So this is chess. This is where AI is at today.
Right.
For Go, the game, they predicted 30 years. They predicted from an extrapolation of complexity of chess versus Go. They said AI is probably going to beat Go in the next 30 years, but it did it in 10. So, yeah, we're really accelerating the pace of machines taking over the world.
But I think that has to do with the amount of data machines have to access as well, right? I mean, like the amount of data, I was reading, I don't remember where, but somewhere I think I read this, that the amount of information created in the last 20 years exceeds the amount of information created in the entire human history prior to that.
Yeah.
So it just, we're putting so much more into it that all extrapolations related to...
And it's all us. We're all training data for, like, the internet is this massive pile of training data for... future AI,
essentially,
right? All of our social media stuff is pretty much like just shaming ourselves.
So you believe in Skynet, basically? Like
pretty much. I think we're seeing the precursors of it.
I think our best hope is a benevolent Skynet.
Or is it the Matrix, one or the other?
The Matrix is not really a good hope, man. I don't want to be a battery.
We don't know. So in more news, I mean, I think it was out today, was... Did SoftBank just bought Boston Robotics from Google?
From Google. Oh, really?
Yeah, you know Boston Robotics.
Yeah,
You've seen
I do.
The videos.
My cousin used to work for them.
The videos are pretty much about how they used to mess with the robots they've created just so that the robots could learn to react.
Right.
Like, I know all the Boston Robotics videos are pretty much humans
hitting,
kicking, thrashing at their robots, and them robots are feebly trying to just stand. And I think the more videos an AI sees about that is...
They're not going to be happy.
They're not going to be benevolent.
Yeah, they're not going to be happy.
So SoftBank now owns Boston Robotics. They own, I think, the ARM processor.
They just acquired that.
And I think they're either preparing for an attack against Skynet or they are Skynet.
They are Skynet. It could be either one.
Someone who knows Masa-san can ask. But yeah, well... I mean, they're also an investor. Have you interacted with them or that side?
I've never seen
Japanese
the benefits of or the lack of SoftBank yet. So I don't. I don't think it's a great thing in our ecosystem in India. I don't think there are that many entrepreneurs that know how to handle that kind of money.
Right.
I don't think there are that many investors that know how to handle that kind of money.
We had Shubham here. He spoke about how housing, one of their early bets, was mishandled.
Yeah.
But anyway, otherwise, coming back to the ecosystem conversation, what have you seen in the last couple of years that you've been here?
Yeah, so I think my first interaction with startups or the startup ecosystem here was actually in probably 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. At that time, there weren't that many startups, and frankly, it was still a time where startups or folks that were doing entrepreneurial pursuits were kind of looked down upon. It was kind of still...
Oh, yeah. I know that one. I know that. We were small business owners.
Yeah.
And
if that.
If at all.
Yeah. And I think that evolution has come completely 180. Like it's dramatically changed.
Right.
Now it is cooler to be a startup entrepreneur than it is to be an investment banker, consultant, or any other kind of high-flying job that used to be around,
right.
Which is very similar to what happened in Silicon Valley. Although here we also went through an evolution of being part of the, having a government job was the cool thing.
Right.
A lot of these things have kind of evolved dramatically. And so I think that's actually a very good thing. There are obviously a lot of negatives to that. You do have a lot of money chasing things that shouldn't be chased after. Mm-hmm. You do have folks that really should not be entrepreneurs that are entrepreneurs. You do have a lot of investors that probably should not be investors.
Oh yeah.
And what's really interesting in India is that if you're a good salesman, you are really good at raising money. And that's all you need to do in India. You don't really have to show track record because there aren't that many folks with track records in India.
But at the same time, I think every investor I've met, whether lucky or unlucky, have said that you should come back when you have track record.
Yeah.
Isn't that the most common dialogue also? So I mean, we're a weird balance of, I think, too aggressive investors and too not so. No, I would say.
Well, I think we're entrepreneurs,
cautious.
right? So I mean, we come at it from the entrepreneur hat. So I mean, we look at it like where we know what we're doing and what we want to do is this is how we should do it, right?
Right.
And they come with the investor comes with his own perspective to it, right?
Right.
I mean, so I think.
I know this is an unending debate, but you've had some good runs.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm here by choice
Right.
in India as opposed to the US. I think that the opportunity in India is massive the next 10 years. I don't know whether that's going to unfold in the next 2 years. It may. To date, there are not that many startups that I've seen that are going to drive massive innovation in India, but there are some. And that's why I'm actually focused on two specific areas, which is FinTech, where I think there's massive opportunity that has global scale coming out of India. Just because of the nature of how our country works, which is you have these two, what people call India and Bharat, and the fact that you have kind of two financial systems, one which is kind of
legit and the dark economy.
Exactly. And so I think there's so many of these weird dualities in India that this is a great breeding ground for kind of the next innovation. Which is why I'm a little bit disappointed. We were talking about digital currencies. Is that I'm surprised that I don't see much in that space in India
happening
at all.
Here, yeah.
In fact, much of the innovation is happening by the government.
Right.
Whether
Which
it's
is crazy.
Aadhaar, whether it's
Yeah.
whether it's Beam, whether it's any of these innovations are actually driven by the government, and that's a great thing in many ways. But as a capitalist, I kind of want to make money off that, and I can't make money off the government in this situation.
Right.
So I would like an entrepreneur to be more involved in those spaces instead of copying what's out there.
I think FinTech is rising. I think FinTech's going through waves itself in India, but definitely it's one of the hot sectors, and I think it should continue to be hot. I mean, that dark economy we spoke about is not going away.
Yeah, it needs to,
it's not going away overnight. So
no, but the government
people are
has
going to start
definite policies or definite objectives of trying to bring that dark economy into the light. So that presents.
But it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while. So I think that allows for fintech innovation to exist. Yeah. But at the same time, I think the fact that
fintech innovation will lead to the dark economy coming into this. I think I think you're going to start seeing policy driven by government, which will kind of push people into using financial technology products, which will then bring people back into the.
But at the same time, I think the fact that India, being so big a country with so much disparity in general tech penetration as well, it's actually one good thing. In case our future AI overlords do take over, they'll come to India and probably fail because not everyone's going to be connected. And they'll be like, shit, we can't get into people's cash. They still use cash. So that's our hedge. That's our hedge against the future in that respect.
So people stuff your mattresses.
So, yeah, but I mean, the stats are saying like demonetization helped kick it up a notch, but not enough still.
No, not. So I mean, like I understand there's a spike, and then it's come back down to like 85% of what was there, and now it's kind of growing at the same rate it was growing at earlier.
So I almost don't even think about kind of the black money, white money innovation, but almost think, so in India, I think finance has always been cutting edge. Things like chit funds are a phenomenal kind of tool. If again talking about decentralized tools, chit funds is a great example of that. Is that you are using your own community to be able to create a loan. And the power of that is phenomenal. Actually, also from a very different method, which is there's social pressure to pay that back. And so, the collection rates for those, or I guess, the equivalent of an NPA in a chit fund is probably significantly lower.
Right.
But I think these types of innovations are massive potential, have massive potential in India. And I think that's where I think there's a lot of interesting things happening. Being able to use these decentralized forms via tokens, for example, to manage real estate or have title insurance, having things like that done. This is one ideal place to do it.
No, that's actually that would just be a massive pain reduction.
Yeah, I think the story has been payments, but essentially it's financial services, which is going to be more of the bigger winner.
Payments. I mean, like
it's just a building block.
Yeah, it's a building block, or is it the cream on top?
I think it's a step towards. I think it's about payments was something to bring people on.
I think
making you do that one first transaction.
Also, I think it's the forward-facing thing, right? I think the bigger opportunity in fintech generally is probably stuff which is more kind of back-end and system-driven.
Yeah. I know. And that's where actually, I mean, again, a lot of big data is being pushed into fintech also, right? I mean, the real winner will be the guy who is able to jump through that data, all of that data, organize it better, see trends which normal humans can't see. And it'll even apply at places like at the stock market.
Yeah, of course. They're doing it. What's this company called? Smart Circles.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of stuff with the BSE.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be used in a lot of places in the country, and it's not going to be just the hype around payments and payments in general. I know credit is on a huge rise. People are just giving loans left, right, and center. And
I get my phone call every day. Would you like an unsecured business loan?
Yeah. But now they'll read your SMS.
Is this from a bank or is this from NBFCs?
I have no idea what it is, man. I mean, it's just a random call. But it's a different bank every day. One day it's HDFC, one day it's SBI, one day it's Bajaj Life, one day it's somebody else.
Soon it'll be a startup.
Probably.
It'll be like, hey, we read your SMS. We know
that you're looking for the money.
You're looking for some money.
You spent too much money last month. Here, why don't you take some from us?
And you don't get paid that much. They'll pretty much chalk out your whole life.
We don't need you. Thank you very much. But that's actually a different thing that I think you hear all these local banks, and one of the other reasons I really like fintech in India is that the regulatory hurdles for kind of foreign entities to come into India is so high that it just makes it very tough for them to play in India. So, you have the PayPals of the world, you have Intuit. All these guys have been here for more than a decade at this point.
Yeah.
And
but they're not leading from the front.
They haven't made a dent. They haven't. I mean, nobody knows them. Really, nobody knows them.
In India, if you're like Intuit does a really pretty good accounting package.
Yeah.
But your chartered accountant will not accept it.
Tally is the only thing they use.
The only thing you can use.
Yeah, so if you want to crack it in fintech in India, you have to be in India and be very thinking like an Indian.
I honestly wanted to use the Intuit product because it was an online product which I could access from anywhere. I don't have a full-time accountant. He could sit anywhere and do the work. I really wanted to use that product, but my charter accountant was just like, nope.
They don't understand anything but Tally.
Nope, you got to use Tally.
Yeah, pretty much. And same with, PayPal has not been able to crack it in India either. They've played it. They play a really safe game, I think, in general, and I think that's where they've let folks like a Paytm and everyone else in the space sort of push ahead by leaps and bounds.
PayPal's eBay owned, right? Even in India?
They were until recently they've spun off into their separate entity.
Okay, all right.
But I think we're talking about only startups, but I'm saying even in finance broadly, right? Is all the multinational banks a decade ago, everybody from Citi to HSBC to Standard Chartered, all these guys that came in poured tons of money into India. Doing
but
retail,
still doing traditional banking. No one's innovated as they're trying to play catch up now suddenly.
Yeah, but actually you're right though. Even on the retail front, maybe Citibank a little bit, but nobody else has made a dent.
Nope.
And even as Citibank is basically HNI.
Yeah.
It's got no presence down at the lower income levels because their account costs are ridiculous. Right. I don't have a Citibank account because I have one, but that's like a American account, but I don't have an Indian Citibank account because why would I want to keep $1 lakh in a current account?
Correct.
Or that seems stupid to me.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys have been pulling back, whether it's in their mutual fund business, asset management businesses, retail branches. All these big banks have been pulling back in the last couple of years, and so I think finance in general, you need to understand the Indian mindset a little bit better and understand regulatory hurdles. Between these two things, I think that's where I feel like there's a big play. That local entrepreneurs can really take advantage of. And payments was, to me, the last thing I really look at from a fintech play.
Right.
And payments, it's only a tool to do anything else in fintech, really.
Right. No, I think it just opened the doors for what else is possible. And I think with credit and stocks and whatnot, is where we'll see a lot of probably more genuine value creation as well instead of just payments. Frankly, even worldwide payments I know is a loss-making business. You will lose money moving money. If it's just for moving the same value of money around, you pretty much lose money all the time. Yeah. Which is why it's a loss leader for most financial firms. But at the same time, including Apple, which announced that they're getting into payments this week with iMessage. They're doing P2P payments in iOS 11.
That's going to be interesting, man.
So even they're getting it, but they're getting into it because they want people to stick to their platform. Yeah. So it's more for making people stick to their platform and hopefully making money from them in other ways than actually making money on payments. So I think that's where the future of fintech in general and similarly in India is going to be. So, that's
but I think, Sean, I think you're right. What we're going to wind up seeing is a bunch of local players. I don't think, Apple's never going to be able to enter India with any kind of payment this, right? That's just not in the realm of possibility.
Samsung Pay is off to a nice start, though.
Is it?
At least folks who have Samsung phones are suddenly realizing, oh, hey, I can pay with my phone.
Yeah, and HDFC's also got a deep partnership with that stuff, right? So I think maybe that might be helpful because, again, HDFC is the private Indian bank that has kind of made some inroads.
Yeah, sort of they've taken steps to be on the forefront of at least the tech side of things. Yeah. But long way to go. I think there's a bunch of innovative stuff to come. Yeah. I haven't seen a chit fund startup yet.
What's the other you said there were two areas that you're interested right now. One was fintech and...
Yeah, so the other one I would say, so I guess there's three. The other one that I'm looking at is industrial IoT, specifically as opposed to consumer. I don't think consumer in India is much harder.
Right.
You either have a powerhouse like the US where a lot of the kind of design is done, and so you really benefit from the expertise in the US, or you have just cost advantage if you're in Korea, Taiwan, or China. And so I don't think India kind of has an advantage in either area. So I think on the consumer side, I'm sure we'll see something, but I don't think that you'll have a global kind of play there.
Right.
Whereas on the industrial IoT side, I guess it's just nomenclature that I'm using. But really what I thought was interesting is that there's a lot of cottage industries in India. Which are global in scale, but much smaller industries as a whole. So, for example, textiles, hand-woven goods, the diamond industry. These are industries which are generally more India-centric, even though they're global.
Right.
And just because the industries themselves are much smaller, the amount of technology being used is often less. And so what ends up happening is that entrepreneurs in this field need to get much further along because venture firms are just not willing to back things that are not billion-dollar opportunities.
Right.
But the reality is there's still multi-$100-million opportunities in these spaces. And so that's what I see as a really big opportunity.
Where a little bit of tech can optimize them way more.
To a great degree,
and I think that's happening. I mean, it's beyond just internet-connected devices. It's the kind of reach, the kind of production quality they can achieve. So there's a lot. Logistics is a huge thing, right? If India logistics is so big, but it's so inefficient, even today. And I think so far also in the last 10 years, people have just been doing GPS tracking, and even that's not being utilized to the best. So I think as that tech gets better and better, and people start to optimize further, imagine how good,
it could,
how much the efficiencies can change your operations at scale.
Unlocking
so much,
value,
and they'll unlock a lot of value. So I think that's where industrial IoT in general plays a large part. All these very large inefficient sectors in the hinterlands of India, which are churning out and making money just on the sheer volume of things, but they could be a lot more efficient.
And again,
power and solar. All of this is solar. Now India has a big solar push.
A big player,
So I think that's again, all of these.
But again, I'm making it sound like I'm like a very pro-government kind of guy, but I'm really not generally. But again, government policies towards small-scale industries kind of will. A lot of them are geared towards this idea of enhancing their technological capability, right? And IoT is actually like the perfect thing for these kinds of guys because they're going to be a bunch of small, inexpensive devices, which just kind of helps them, which basically just kind of gets their data centralized. In this case, I guess, in this case is a good idea.
But then they can probably get paid by Bitcoin.
There you go. Centralization to decentralization.
In this case, the centralization is for efficiencies more than in decentralization's case where it's more about privacy.
Right.
I think So I think the industrial IoT sector is really interesting, but I don't think that's going to be on global scale. The third sector, which I'm still a little bit cautious about at this point, is healthcare.
Okay.
I think that's where, and specifically when I say healthcare, I guess I'm specifically focused on medical devices, and that to low cost, where there's a lot of potential innovation to create low cost things, as opposed to the very, very high cost. This we've seen in various different devices is like stents. Where there's massive opportunities. The other big place is computative kind of healthcare, where whether it's genetics or using a lot of the data that you're getting about your body is going to help you diagnose or preemptively kind of prescribe things that you need to take. And I think that there's a lot of potential in India specifically.
But we don't collect enough data for that. I mean,
that's exactly his point, right? The fact that we are so data inefficient in healthcare means there's so much ground to cover in terms of making things better.
I think that is a problem, the data collection piece. But I think the expertise lies here because it's not, there's a little bit more labor-intensive kind of work that you need to do in terms of sieving out what kind of data to use and what to do with the data.
Right.
Which means that you need to kind of get a lot more people involved.
Right.
Which means that because of our lower cost here, we have an advantage in that space.
Right.
And these guys are, the Infosys of the world. If they adapt properly, that is the next area where they can still survive on, instead of pure play BPO type of work.
Yeah, that business is dying soon.
Yep.
I mean, that's not going to last forever.
Right.
Yep.
So.
No, so interesting. I think we are going to see some
medical technology
advances.
just generally. I mean, like what's going on in India with medical stuff is kind of interesting, right? I mean, practice has become such a big thing of this, and that's again, that's just appointment scheduling.
Yep.
At the end of it, right?
Literally.
But it's
the just style of
doctors.
medicals.
Yeah, exactly. But still, I mean, like the traction that has gained is like tremendous, and
no, it's I think one of the first set of innovations which we are going to keep seeing in healthcare. Like you mentioned with devices, I think that's a big breakthrough, right? I mean, the smallest of clinics are obviously understaffed, but even then, a doctor could probably be 100 times more efficient with a little bit of tech at his disposal, which he can work.
Medical records, man. I mean, like, so I go to South Bombay, apna Balkeshwar doctor, Mukhopadhyaya. For the last few years now, I've been taking them a notebook. So they now write down what's wrong with me. But before that, I have no medical records of whatever I did in the 15 years before that.
Wow.
Like, I haven't gotten like really sick or anything like that, but which I guess if I had, then I would have hospital records. But I mean, like just stuff like, I broke my foot or whatever it might be, right? There's no record of any of this stuff, right? I had
that's true, actually.
A swollen liver, and because of that, I had to take like some medication to kind of like,
we probably go to the doctor. I mean, some people probably, I know, I used to get like allergies or something or the other every year.
Yeah.
But I just popped a pill and never went to a doctor most of the years.
No, but even if you do go to a doctor, right? If a doctor sees that you're coming to him every year in May, right?
They know
then he knows that there's something happening in May that you're probably allergic to.
Yeah, but
they don't have that data.
Yeah, that's true.
And that to me is like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, a lot of...
So I agree with you there. I think medical records is definitely a play.
Yeah.
But frankly, I think that there's already a lot of folks that are going after that in the US and European countries.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be surprised, you have an SAP for all these things on the high-end side.
Right.
And so you have this trickle down of the SME versions of an SAP.
Right.
On the medical device side or, on the collection of data side. But I think where the real innovation in India happens to be is not that. It's more, so let me give you an example of Arvind Eye Care. So these guys basically do, I can't remember the numbers anymore, but I think it's, they process like 100,000 cataracts or something.
Okay.
And so they became incredibly good with cataracts, and the reason they can do so much volume is they do free cataracts for rural areas, and the way they survive and still generate money is that they charge for higher end. So for example, if you or I wanted to go do it, you would pay for it only because you would want the after services. So the actual cataract procedure is the exact same. So it's not like they have a lower version of that. But it's the benefit of having a room, it's the benefit of having a nurse tend to you constantly, things of that nature that they'll make you pay for, which kind of subsidizes the overall cost of doing these free cataracts. Now, because of that, which is, by the way, its own innovation and very kind of social, but yet capitalistic kind of innovation. But that's a different story altogether. What's more interesting is that because of the high volumes, the lenses that they've been able to come up with to solve these issues, they've dropped down the cost from, I think it was like $80 or $90 to about $5.
Okay.
And they were able to come up with their own IP around both the manufacturing processes for these lenses and new innovations in that space.
Interesting.
So these things have dropped the global cost of these types of issues. And that's where I think the massive innovation
lies. So this is where India shines in these so big domestic scale opportunities is where actually you realize the potential of innovation in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think healthcare, there should be a lot more happening in healthcare, and I'm sure it is. and with the right backing, I'm sure it'll be as interesting as FinTech is today. I mean, I know it's a lot of people don't get into it thinking, I'm not qualified and so on. But even I think the Practo guy and even most other folks, even Diabito and so on, they've all their history is they're not medically backed folks. They're not medical students. It's just that they had to deal with an inefficiency at some point, and they went out and innovated.
Yeah,
so I think
for me, actually, my background is biomedical engineering, and I'm staying away from that space. The reason is because I think from a regulation perspective, India doesn't have much on the regulations for medical devices, and so that makes it scarier for an investor. Is that with one signature, some rule can change, and suddenly your business kind of is dead. So that makes it a little scary for an investor. But otherwise, I think the medical device field soon should be a very interesting area.
Oh, I think healthcare in general, and let's hope to see a whole bunch of innovation there going forward. But I think we're at the end of our show. I think we've been chatting for a while, and it's been a good chat. And
this was fun.
Covered quite a bit about what's happening this week, and great to have you, Shalin, and hope to have you back
this is awesome.
At some point too. Since you're a already experienced podcaster yourself,
we didn't talk about his podcast at all.
We hope to see you maybe in a future podcast.
Let's at least mention his podcast, right?
Yeah.
So Shalin's been working on a podcast, or has worked on a podcast called The Pitch India Version, which should be available, I guess, on iTunes and those kinds of places.
Yeah, so I stopped doing it for a while now, but I hope to kind of start it again soon.
Yeah, but you should check that out, and we should at least mention the podcast, right?
Yeah,
if somebody does podcasts, we got to tell them about podcasts.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think the more people doing talk radio, it's more conversations. Yeah. And
can I do my weekly begging for reviews and ratings and stuff like that? Hey, people, please go to iTunes, review, rate, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to join our Slack channel, just go to the website, ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1, and there's a button over there where you can request an invitation to the Slack channel. And please give us reviews and ratings.
Superb. So, Shalin, you want to shout out to how people can reach you? Because I know when we mention angel investor, there are a bunch of folks who reach out and want to pitch to you. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty easily accessible. If somebody that's within my third, fourth network, or through LinkedIn. I actually am one of the few people that will look at my LinkedIn requests. And so
I look at LinkedIn once a month.
No, I look at it fairly regularly. Every Monday I get the notification from LinkedIn, and then I'm like, okay, let me go see who requested. So
doesn't mean I reply to all of them, but I certainly look at them.
Exactly.
But great. But if you join our Slack channel, you can talk to Shalin there.
Indeed.
So thanks so much, Shalin. Thank you, Amit, as always. I think we're at the end of another episode. I think it's been a great chat, and thank you guys. I hope to see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Excuse me, भैया. Excuse me.
बोलिए मैडम.
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वैक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, टिंग्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है, और द फैन गराज है. आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम. आप जाओ ivmpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप. सब आपकी उंगलियों पे.